From the National Newsroom of the Canadian Press, I'm Jason White. Canadians have gathered to honor the sacrifice of men and women in uniform who gave their lives in service of Canada's values and principles. Private John Priest enlisted at just 16 years old and says he has a difficult time explaining what that time of his life was like.
You don't even know them, and they don't know you, and it's not very nice. And that's all I can say. It's really a terrible scene. And the older I get, the more I think how ridiculous it all was.
He's among the increasingly small number of Second World War veterans who attended the National Remembrance Day ceremony in Ottawa. In the U.S., President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris participated in the annual Veterans Day observance at Arlington National Cemetery. They laid a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier, and Biden delivered remarks at the amphitheater. It was their first appearance together since Harris's presidential election loss. The Port of Montreal's Employers Association has made good on its threat to lock out nearly 1,200 longshore workers if they didn't accept what it called a final contract offer.
The lockout took effect Sunday, and the Maritime Employers Association is asking Federal Labour Minister Stephen McKinnon to intervene. McKinnon's office called on both sides at the country's second-largest port to recognize the urgency of the situation and get back to the table. The union representing the dock workers told a news conference it has long been ready to get back to negotiating, but hasn't heard from the employer. The Port of Montreal moves nearly $400 million in goods every day, and its CEO says the consequences of a prolonged conflict will eventually trickle down from supply chain to factories to retailers. Siddhartha Banerjee, The Canadian Press.
The twin port disruptions in Vancouver and Montreal have business groups growing anxious. Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters says hundreds of millions of dollars in goods are not moving because of the strikes and lockouts. The group's president calls for a better way to resolve contract disputes. Canada's big three telecommunications companies say they've already taken action to reduce the cost of international cell phone roaming. Last month, the CRTC warned Bell Canada, Rogers Communications, and TELUS they could face regulatory intervention if they didn't show sufficient progress. A Denver family is still looking for answers about an ill-fated trip to Louisiana last month.
When she realized a year ago that Taylor Swift would perform New Orleans, Katie Sanchez booked a two-night stay at the Baymont by Wyndham in nearby Marrero. The night before the show, the Sanchez's pulled up to find
the property is entirely dark.
The family scrambled.
We know what Taylor Swift does to hotel availability.
The Baymont had been permanently closed after Hurricane Ida 3 years ago. The family's waiting for reimbursement and an explanation as to how they were able to book a room at a closed-down hotel. Jim Ryan, ABC News.
This is the Canadian Press. In sports, the visiting Montreal Canadiens have pulled off a win in Buffalo. They beat the Sabres 7-5 in an NHL matinee. Tonight's NHL action sees the Calgary Flames host the Los Angeles Kings. The Kings are at the top of the Pacific Division. Calgary's won just 3 of its last 10 games. Carlos Alcaraz looked little like the player who won 2 Grand Slams this year in a loss to Casper Ruud at the ATP Finals. It marked Ruud's first victory over Alcaraz in 5 career meetings. The result could make it difficult for the Spanish tennis star to advance from the round-robin stage at the season-ending event in Turin, Italy. The Billie Jean King Cup Finals begin this week in Spain, with some added attention given to the victims of the country's deadly floods. Canada goes into the finals as the Cup's defending champion. It'll be the first time the women's team event will take place at the same venue and with overlapping dates as the Davis Cup. From the Canadian Press, I'm Jason White.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to follow and subscribe. For more of today's top stories, visit thecanadianpressnews.ca.